The morning sun spread a golden glow across the massive aircraft carrier, its metal surface shining like a sleeping beast. Sailors moved quickly on the deck, shouting orders, carrying tools, and preparing for the Admiral's inspection. Everyone looked sharp and alert, everyone except one old man walking slowly down the pier. He wore a faded red jacket, a pair of worn-out boots, and a cap that had seen better days. His steps were slow but steady, his eyes filled with quiet strength. Some young sailors looked at him curiously. Others smirked, whispering to each other. "Who let Grandpa on board?" one of them joked. "Maybe he got lost," another replied with a laugh. But the old man didn't react. He just kept walking toward the ship as if he belonged there. At the top of the gangway, a young officer blocked his way. "Sir, this is a restricted area. Civilians aren't allowed beyond this point." The old man stopped. He took a deep breath and looked at the officer. His voice was calm but firm. "I was invited," he said. "Name's Jack Turner." The officer frowned and checked his list. "Jack Turner?" He flipped through a few papers and then shrugged. "I don't see any Turner here. Are you sure you have the right ship?" Jack gave a faint smile. "Oh, I'm sure. I helped build her." The officer blinked, confused. Before he could reply, a voice called out from behind him. "Let him through, Ensign." The officer turned. It was Commander Harris, the man in charge of the engineering crew. He walked up and looked at Jack with a strange mix of surprise and respect. "Jack Turner. I've heard that name before," Harris said. "You worked on the original engine design, didn't you?" Jack nodded. "That was a long time ago. Back when this ship was just a pile of steel." Harris extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, sir. It's an honor." Jack shook his hand and stepped onto the deck. The young sailors stopped laughing. The old man they'd mocked had once helped bring their mighty ship to life. Inside the engine control room, Jack's eyes softened as he looked around. Everything had changed. New digital panels, blinking lights, and computer screens. But deep inside, beneath the modern shell, he could still feel the heartbeat of the ship he once knew. He ran his fingers along a control lever, the same kind he had designed decades ago. "Still here," he whispered to himself. Commander Harris watched him quietly. "We're having some trouble with the auxiliary power unit," he said. "It keeps cutting out during testing. None of our techs can figure it out." Jack turned toward him, curiosity lighting up his face. "You think I could take a look?" Harris hesitated. "Honestly, sir, it's pretty complicated. We've got specialists working on it." Jack smiled again. That same calm, confident smile. Complicated is what makes it fun. Before Harris could stop him, Jack stepped closer to the main control console. The young sailors nearby exchanged looks. One of them whispered, "He's gonna mess everything up." Another chuckled, "Bet he doesn't even know how to use these systems." Jack ignored them all. His hands moved slowly but surely, touching each switch, each wire, each gauge as if reading a language only he understood. He leaned closer to the main power control panel and listened, really listened, to the soft hum of the ship. Then he said quietly, "Your sensors are fine. It's your timing relay that's off. Old machine, new parts. They're not talking to each other." The engineers stared at him in confusion. "That's impossible," one of them muttered. "We checked all relays." Jack chuckled softly. "You checked the new ones, but did you check the old core behind the panel?" Before anyone could answer, Jack reached for a small access latch, opened the side cover, and pointed. "There. That connector's been replaced with a newer model. It's drawing too much current. That's your fault line." The room fell silent. Harris called for his technician to test the line. Within seconds, the readings confirmed Jack's words. The Admiral himself, who had just entered the room for inspection, raised an eyebrow. "Who's this?" he asked, looking at the old man standing confidently among the stunned crew. Commander Harris straightened. "Sir, this is Jack Turner. He was part of the original design team." The Admiral gave a short laugh. "That was nearly 40 years ago. I didn't realize our ships came with ghosts." Jack didn't flinch. He looked at the Admiral and said, "Maybe, sir, but sometimes ghosts know things the living forget." The Admiral studied him for a moment. There was something about the old man's tone. Not arrogance, but quiet truth. Still, he crossed his arms. "All right, Mr. Turner. If you're as good as they say, let's see what you can do. The auxiliary power has been unstable for weeks. Bring it online." The room went still. The young crew members exchanged looks of disbelief. One whispered, "He's not really going to let him touch the controls, right?" But the Admiral stepped aside and gestured toward the panel. "Go ahead, Mr. Turner. Show us." Jack walked forward slowly, his eyes scanning the dials and switches. He placed his hand gently on the main lever. For a moment, he just stood there, listening to the faint hum of the engines below deck. Then, in a steady voice, he said, "All right, old girl. Let's wake you up." He pulled the lever down. The hum grew louder. Lights flickered. Systems came alive, and the deep vibration of the engines filled the room. Everyone froze. The ship's power levels stabilized perfectly for the first time in weeks. Jack smiled softly, almost like he was greeting an old friend. The Admiral's eyes widened. "That's impossible," he murmured. Jack stepped back, wiping his hands on his jacket. "Not impossible, sir. Just forgotten." The young sailors who had laughed earlier now stood in silent awe. The Admiral didn't say a word. He just looked at the old mechanic with newfound respect, and something close to admiration. For the first time in years, the ship purred like it was alive again, and no one could explain how the old man had done it. But this was only the beginning, because what Jack Turner was about to uncover next would shake the entire fleet. The room was still, buzzing after Jack Turner had brought the carrier's power back online. The soft hum of the engines was steady now, a deep and comforting sound that filled every corner of the ship. The Admiral stood there, his arms folded, his sharp eyes fixed on the old mechanic who had just done what his young engineers couldn't. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The crew simply stared at Jack in disbelief. Then slowly, whispers spread through the control room. "Did you see that? He fixed it just like that. No manuals, no tools? Nothing!" The Admiral finally broke the silence. "Impressive, Mr. Turner," he said, his voice calm but cold. "But let's be clear. This ship isn't a museum. It's a war machine. We don't run it on luck and memories." Jack met the Admiral's gaze without fear. "I agree, sir. But sometimes experience can save you when manuals can't." A few of the younger officers exchanged glances, uncomfortable. The Admiral, however, wasn't done. His pride had been touched. He took a step closer to Jack. "Let's put your experience to the test, then. If you're as good as they say, I want you to fix one more thing. Something even my best engineers can't handle." Commander Harris turned to him, uneasy. "Sir, are you sure?" "Yes, Commander," the Admiral interrupted firmly. "If Mr. Turner here wants to prove his skill, let's see how far that old wisdom goes." Jack smiled slightly. "I'm listening, Admiral." The Admiral nodded to Harris. "Tell him." Harris sighed and walked toward the control map. He pointed to a red-marked section near the stern of the ship. "The main turbine system has been acting up. Random power surges, unstable readings. We've replaced parts, checked circuits. Nothing works. It's the one thing standing between this ship and full operational clearance." Jack nodded slowly, studying the map. "Turbine room, eh? That's where the ship breathes." He looked up. "Mind if I take a look?" The Admiral raised an eyebrow. "You'll have limited access, and you'll be accompanied by my chief engineer." Jack chuckled softly. "Fair enough, sir. I've worked under worse conditions." As Jack made his way down the long metal corridors, the sound of the engines echoed faintly around him. The air grew warmer as they approached the lower decks. Every step felt like a walk back in time. The smell of oil, the vibration of the hull, the rhythm of machinery. The chief engineer, Lieutenant Mason, followed closely behind. He was young, sharp, and clearly skeptical. "You really think you can fix the turbine, old man?" Mason asked with a smirk. Jack didn't turn around. "I don't think, son." "I listen," Mason frowned. "Listen? To what?" Jack stopped and tapped the metal wall lightly with his knuckles. "To her. Ships talk, you know. You just have to know how to hear them." "To her. Ships talk, you know. You just have to know how to hear them." Mason rolled his eyes. "Right." They entered the turbine room. A massive space filled with spinning machinery, flashing lights, and the deep thrum of power. But something was off. The vibration wasn't smooth. It came in uneven pulses. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, listening carefully. Then he whispered, "She's choking." Mason blinked. "What?" Jack opened his eyes. "Too much pressure in the second feed line. It's starving the intake on the third. The flow's uneven." Mason hurried to the console. "That's not possible. The sensors don't show any issue there." Jack walked over and crouched beside the turbine casing. His hands brushed against a set of older pipes beneath the new wiring. He could feel the faint heat difference between them. "That's because your sensors are reading the wrong line," he said quietly. He stood up, turned to Mason, and added, "You upgraded your monitoring system but didn't recalibrate the flow routes. The readings are off by 2 degrees of alignment. The computer thinks it's normal, but the ship doesn't." Mason looked at him, unsure whether to laugh or be amazed. "You can tell that just by touch?" Jack gave a half smile. "By touch, sound, and 40 years of mistakes." Before Mason could reply, the Admiral's voice came over the comms. "Report, Lieutenant. Has the old man fixed your ghost problem yet?" Mason hesitated, then replied, "Not yet, sir. He's diagnosing." Jack chuckled quietly. "Diagnosing. I like that." He turned one of the manual valves halfway open. then signaled Mason to restart the auxiliary pump. The turbines began to spin faster, their roar growing deeper and smoother. The lights stabilized. The readings on the control panel turned green one by one. Mason's eyes widened. It's stable. How did you? Jack wiped his hands and said simply, "Sometimes the old ways still work." The Admiral's voice returned, sharper now. "Are you telling me it's fixed?" Mason replied, "Yes, sir. Perfectly stable." A short pause, then the Admiral said, "Bring him back to the bridge." When Jack returned, the Admiral was waiting near the main deck, hands behind his back, staring out at the open sea. The sky had turned orange with sunset. "So, you did it again," the Admiral said without turning. "Twice in one day." Jack stood beside him quietly. "I didn't do anything special, sir. The ship just needed someone to listen." The Admiral looked at him now, his expression unreadable. "You know, Turner, when I first saw you walk on board this morning, I thought you were just another old man chasing memories. Now I'm starting to think you might be the only one who truly understands this ship." Jack smiled faintly. "Respect goes both ways, Admiral. Machines, people, doesn't matter. You give them respect, they give it back." The Admiral nodded slowly, but then turned serious again. "You've earned my attention, Mr. Turner. But I still don't understand how you knew about the relay, or that pressure line. No manuals, no readings, or just instinct?" Jack's eyes grew distant. "Let's just say, this ship remembers her builders. She talks to those who listen." The Admiral stared at him for a long moment. "You make it sound like she's alive." Jack glanced at the horizon. "Maybe she is." The wind picked up slightly, carrying the deep hum of the ship's engines through the air. For a moment, both men stood in silence, listening. Then the Admiral spoke again. "Tomorrow morning, we're running a full systems test. Every engine, every weapon, every circuit. I want you there." Jack turned to him. "Are you sure, sir? I'm not part of your crew." "You are now," the Admiral said firmly. "Let's see if your ghost stories can keep up with the Navy's best." Jack gave a small grin. "Challenge accepted." As he walked away, the Admiral watched him go. The old mechanic with the steady walk and the knowing eyes. He didn't say it aloud, but somewhere deep down, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: trust. What the Admiral didn't know, however, was that the ship had one more secret, one buried deep within its systems, and Jack Turner was the only man who could uncover it. The next morning, the ship was alive with movement. Crew members rushed through the narrow corridors. Engineers shouted updates, and alarms beeped softly as systems powered up. Today was the big day. The full systems test. The Admiral stood on the bridge, his uniform crisp, his eyes fixed on the endless blue horizon. Beside him, Commander Harris was reading through reports. "Engines are at full readiness," Harris said. "All systems stable since yesterday." The Admiral gave a short nod. "And the old mechanic?" Harris smiled faintly. "Jack Turner's already in the engine room, sir. Said he wanted to listen before we start." The Admiral's lips pressed into a thin line. "That man's methods are unusual. But results speak louder than methods." Harris hesitated. "You don't trust him?" The Admiral turned slowly, his voice calm but sharp. "Trust isn't the word, Commander. I respect him. But I also know experience doesn't explain everything. Yesterday he touched a few switches, and systems that were dead for weeks came back to life. I don't like things I can't explain." Harris looked thoughtful. "He's been around ships longer than most of us have been alive, sir." "Exactly," the Admiral said quietly. "And sometimes people who know too much know things they shouldn't." Down below, in the humming heart of the ship, Jack Turner stood alone beside the main turbine. His hands rested on the rail, his gaze distant. He could feel the energy flowing through the metal beneath his fingers. Every vibration, every pulse told him something. Something small, something off. He frowned slightly. The rhythm wasn't smooth anymore. It was faint, like a heartbeat skipping every few seconds. He leaned closer, listening carefully. Then softly he whispered, "That's not right." Footsteps echoed behind him. Lieutenant Mason entered holding a clipboard. "Morning, old man," he said. "Ready for the big test?" Jack didn't turn around. "Something's wrong, Mason," Mason sighed. "Not this again. The readings are perfect. All systems green." Jack finally looked at him, his eyes sharp. "The readings lie." Mason laughed nervously. "You really believe this ship talks to you, don't you?" Jack didn't answer. Instead, he moved toward a control panel and pressed his palm flat against it. The hum beneath the surface was uneven now, and colder. He whispered almost to himself, "Someone's been in here." Mason frowned. "What do you mean?" Jack turned. "This line," he pointed, "was rerouted overnight. Look closely. The bolts are cleaner than the others. Someone replaced this connection recently. But it's not in the maintenance log." Mason bent down to check. You're right, but why would anyone do that? Jack's expression darkened. To make the system fail, but not right away, slowly, quietly. Mason's face went pale. You think it's sabotage? Jack didn't reply. He looked up at the glowing pipes and the humming turbines. The ship seemed to groan, almost as if she was warning him. Who else has clearance to this section? Jack asked. Only engineering crew, Mason said quickly. And Commander Harris during inspection rounds. Jack narrowed his eyes. Then someone on this crew is playing a dangerous game. Up on the bridge, the Admiral gave the order. Begin system tests. The deck vibrated as the engines roared to full power. Monitors flickered to life, displaying rows of green indicators. Everything appeared normal. Power stable at 98%, an officer reported. The Admiral nodded. Good. Proceed with the stress test. But deep below, Jack Turner's voice suddenly came through the comms. Bridge, this is Turner. Stop the test, now, the Admiral frowned. What is it, Mr. Turner? Something's wrong in the turbine chamber, Jack said firmly. You need to shut it down before it's too late. Harris leaned over the console. Jack, the readings are perfect. There's no reason to stop. Jack's voice hardened. Readings don't save ships, Commander. People do. Shut it down. The Admiral hesitated. What's the problem exactly? There was a pause. Then Jack replied, If you push the engines now, one of those lines is going to burst. And if it does, you'll lose half your power, maybe more. The Admiral turned to his officers. Check it. They quickly scanned the data. Everything was green. No signs of failure. Sir, he's wrong, one officer said. All systems stable. The Admiral took a breath. Continue the test. Down below, Jack slammed his hand against the railing. You stubborn fool, he muttered. She's trying to tell you. He turned to Mason. We need to relieve the pressure. Now. Mason hesitated. But the system's locked. We can't open the valves manually while the test is active. Jack's eyes narrowed. Then we override it. He grabbed a wrench and moved to the secondary access panel. Sparks flew as he forced open the cover. Find the auxiliary shutoff, he shouted. Mason searched frantically. Here! Jack twisted the lever hard. The turbines let out a deep groan, like the ship was crying out. Then, silence. For a few terrifying seconds, the entire room went dark. The hum of the engines died completely. Up on the bridge, alarms began to blare. Sir! Power loss in the lower turbines! The Admiral's face went pale. What happened? Then, through the static, Jack's voice came again. You almost lost her, Admiral. Explain, the Admiral demanded. There was a faulty bypass line, Jack said slowly. Someone rerouted power to a secondary conduit. It would have overloaded under stress. The Admiral exchanged a shocked glance with Harris. Are you saying this was sabotage? Jack's tone was calm but serious. I'm saying someone wanted your ship to fail. And if I hadn't stopped the test, you'd be dragging this vessel back to port. Or worse. Later that evening, the Admiral called a private meeting. Only Harris, Mason, and Jack were present. The lights were dim, the air heavy with tension. Mr. Turner, the Admiral said, I owe you an explanation and an apology. You saved this ship today. Jack shook his head. Save your apology, sir. Save it for whoever you find responsible. The Admiral nodded grimly. We'll find them. Every log, every maintenance report will be checked. No one tampers with my ship. Harris leaned forward. Sir, if Jack hadn't noticed, I know, the Admiral cut in. We'd be at the bottom of the ocean. Jack looked down at the table, his voice quiet. This wasn't random, Admiral. Someone did this carefully. They knew where to strike. The Admiral studied him. You seem certain. Jack met his eyes. I've seen sabotage before. Back in my day, during testing, a small change could destroy everything. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The Admiral straightened. Then they're still among us. For a moment, no one spoke. The low hum of the engines returned, steady once more, echoing through the silence like a warning. Jack turned toward the window, watching the dark waves outside. His reflection stared back, older, wiser, but troubled. He whispered to himself, Old ghosts never rest easy. The Admiral heard him. What did you say? Jack looked at him, his eyes shadowed. I said this ship has a memory, Admiral, and I think she's trying to remind us of something. Or someone. The Admiral frowned. Someone? Jack's voice dropped to a whisper. Someone who was supposed to be gone, but isn't. The next morning the sea was calm. Too calm. The ship moved gently across the waves, but something felt different. There was a silence in the air, heavy and waiting. Jack Turner stood alone in the engine control room, staring at the same panel where he had once saved the ship. His reflection in the glass looked tired but alert. He had been awake all night, going through maintenance logs, one by one. And then, he found it, a name. Someone who shouldn't have been there. Someone who had clearance long ago, but not anymore. He whispered the name under his breath. Cole Matthews, Jack's eyes narrowed. Cole had been part of the original engineering team, decades ago. A brilliant man, but one who'd been dismissed after a tragic explosion during early sea trials. Jack remembered that day clearly. Lives had been lost. Cole had blamed the Navy for covering up his design flaw, and now, it seemed he was back. Jack walked to the comm panel and pressed the button. "Admiral, it's Turner. I know who did it." The Admiral's voice crackled through. "Report to the bridge immediately." Minutes later, Jack arrived. The Admiral was waiting, standing near the large observation window, the ocean stretching endlessly behind him. Commander Harris and Lieutenant Mason stood beside him, tense. Jack handed over the log. "Cole Matthews," he said. "The system changes match his old coding patterns. Someone used his access ID to reroute the power." Harris frowned. "But that's impossible." "Matthews died years ago." Jack shook his head slowly. "Maybe he did. Maybe someone else didn't." The Admiral scanned the report, his jaw tightening. "Are you saying there's still someone on this ship working under his name?" Jack's eyes met his. "I'm saying whoever did this isn't just trying to harm the ship, Admiral. They're trying to erase what it stands for." The Admiral turned toward the window, deep in thought. Then suddenly, the lights flickered. "Power fluctuation," Mason shouted. "Engines dropping!" The ship trembled. Alarms screamed through the control room. Jack rushed to the comm. "It's happening again!" "Someone's still in the system." The Admiral barked orders. "Shut down all remote access! Lock every deck!" But Jack was already moving. He ran back down the narrow corridors, his old boots thudding against the steel floor. He reached the engine room just as the turbines began to overload. Through the haze of steam and light, he saw a figure standing near the main console, wearing a maintenance suit. Jack called out, "Stop! Don't do it!" The figure turned. A young man, pale, nervous, eyes full of anger. "You don't understand," the man shouted. "He was my father!" They blamed him for everything. "He just wanted justice." Jack froze. "You're Cole's son." The young man's voice broke. "He died forgotten, but not by me." The turbines screamed louder. The control panel glowed red. Jack stepped forward slowly. "Listen, son. Your father didn't want this. He wanted to build something that lasted, not destroy it." For a moment, the boy hesitated. The alarms grew louder. Jack took one more step. "Trust me. I was there." He was a good man. Tears filled the young man's eyes. He reached for the lever, and Jack's hand closed over his. Together they pulled it back. The turbines slowed. The lights steadied. The ship sighed, alive once more. When Jack returned to the bridge, the Admiral was waiting. "It's over," Jack said quietly. "He just wanted his father's name cleared." The Admiral nodded slowly. "And you stopped him?" Jack smiled faintly. "No, Admiral. He stopped himself." They stood in silence, watching the horizon. The ship moved forward, strong and steady, like nothing had happened. The Admiral turned to Jack. "You've done more for this vessel than anyone. She's yours as much as she's mine." Jack looked out at the sea, the sunlight dancing across the waves. "No, sir. She belongs to everyone who ever believed in her, even the ones who aren't here anymore." The Admiral gave a small salute. "Then let's make sure they're never forgotten." Jack nodded slowly. The engines hummed beneath them, steady, alive, eternal. As the ship sailed into the golden light, Jack whispered softly, "Rest easy, old girl. You've done your duty." The camera would fade on his face, lined with wisdom, peace, and pride. As the sound of the ocean merged with the deep heartbeat of the ship, the end. Merged with the deep heartbeat of the ship, the end.